Yeah.
I have to admit I had, so my tabs were all color-coded, and I put a little gray tab, because gray is a gray area, next to Frankie's little conversation about, so the counselor suggested team sports and pushed her to join the girls' field hockey team.
Oh, God.
That was not a productive solution. It was the girls' team. Boys didn't even play field hockey. Boys thought nothing of field hockey. Frankie was not interested in playing a sport that was rated as nothing by the more powerful half of the population. I mean, that is the, I think, perfect example of what, she has this unfortunate opinion still that men legitimize things.
And yet, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and yet the book provides examples of people like Trish and Zada who counter that argument and say, well, why don't you just, Zada says to her, why don't you just go, start your own club? Why do you need to be a part of their club? And so I just feel like, since the book offers those counterexamples.
Can I say something about Trish?
Yeah.
I loved Trish as a counterexample, and I cringed at the books. The book said a few times, I don't have a highlighted book like you do, but there were several times in the book when it was about to say something that Frankie was going to do, it said, most girls wouldn't have done this. More than once, it set Frankie apart from most girls. And that made me feel that the book, although providing those two counterexamples, it was valuing Frankie above girls who liked to bake or whatever, or girls who went and did other things and said, start your own team. I felt uncomfortable the way the book kept setting Frankie apart from most girls. If she's going to be a feminist, I didn't want her to be so incredibly unique in that way.
And one of the things I tried to mark is, for me, there was just this kind of, so there were things that Frankie was thinking. There were things that the book was thinking and presenting, and sometimes I would get a little confused between the two, because I really felt like Frankie was thinking that her feminism is more feminist than other people's feminism or something like that, but the book wasn't actually thinking that way about Trish or about Zada, except that sometimes the language said that it was. Like, I was getting confused sometimes.
There's an unseen narrator, and it's hard to figure out who that is.
Yes.
And I agree, it's really hard to figure out sort of even when that person is talking. But in those particular examples when it said most girls wouldn't have done this, to me it did sound like the narrator.
I feel like there's actually, we can almost break it down into three things, which is what Frankie feels, what the narrator feels, and what the book is presenting.
Yeah.
But the problem is, like, I and all of us are bringing an adult feminist perspective to this. So when we're reading this and saying, that is so blatant that it's the book saying, look at this, this is crazy. I don't know if that's just me as a feminist knowing to read that way.
See, I also disagree that it's crazy. I mean, one thing that I think interesting is that all three of you are taking it for granted at that viewpoint of like, well, I don't want to do the field hockey for these reasons, and everything that encompasses is a bad viewpoint. Okay.
I'm not necessarily.
Okay, yeah, because this is a particular place where I mean, outside of this book, as a feminist, am very, it's all very kinda, like so I was listening, my reread was the audiobook, so it was slower than I read, so I had a lot more time to think as it developed, and so when the counselor said field hockey, before I got to the moment where Frankie said, I don't want to join the girls' field hockey team, like, that's just girls, I got this aghast moment of field hockey? Seriously? She's suggesting field hockey? Not that there's anything wrong with field hockey. It is a sport. Absolutely it's a sport. Women's sports and girls' sports are sports. But the idea that for a girl who was acting out in the same way that the boys are, that the alternatives that the counselor suggested were female-only activities horrified me. And I have this as an adult feminist, and I'm pretty sure I had this same conflict as an adolescent feminist. I had this constant conflict between, we need to value traditionally feminine things, we need to value baking, we need to value knitting, we need to value field hockey, we need to value all those things, but at the same time, when Zada says, why don't you just form your own club, and when Trish says, why don't you just come bake with me, those actually aren't valid substitutions to fighting the patriarchy.
They're not what she's interested in also.
First of all, they're not what she's interested in. She wants to be part of their club. She wants to be a Bassett. And second of all, you know what? There is a vast network of privilege that, you know, Zada can scoff at all she wants, but those boys are going to go on to be ambassadors and CEOs, and they're going to destroy the mortgage market and bring down the euro and, you know, like, get vast bailouts from TARP money, and I'm sorry, my politics are coming through.
And be the CEOs of for-profit insurance companies.
And the girls from Alabaster who say, well, I'm going to, you know, go bake or form my own club, are not going to do those things.
No, although they might marry people.
They might marry people who do those things, which are also valid life choices, but not the life choice that Frankie wants to make. Frankie wants to be the ambassador or the CEO or the senator.
Although
that's her life choice.
I'd note that, like, it doesn't mean that they won't go on to be the CEO or be the ambassador. It just means they're going to have a much harder road getting there.
Because they're not in the club.
Right. And I think that the Frankie perspective is more, you fight now so you don't have to fight later, as opposed to you have to find the different path to get there.
Right.
Right. And also, this here is wrong. This here is wrong now, and so I want to break into this now.
Right.
Like, there's no small example. Like, there's no small injustice, really.
Right. So on the one hand, like, yes, she scoffs at girl things, and it is hard to separate how much that's Frankie and how much of the text is, like, saying, and Trish wanted to bake, and she thought this was the solution. But, and I actually think Zada is a good counterexample to it being the text, because when Zada says, why don't you just form your own club, I think that the book, I don't think the story is framing Zada as being wrong. Not necessarily as being right, but certainly not as being wrong. But, you know, so on the one hand, Frankie is scoffing of things that it is rude for her to scoff at. But on the other hand, there is an injustice in the world, and she's trying to fix it. And everyone who sees her trying to fix it, including her sister, who's at Berkeley, including her roommate, everyone who sees her trying to fix it says, I don't see why you need to throw your head against that brick wall. And the answer is, because there's a brick wall there, and there shouldn't be.
I will interject that
Okay.
the one person who I think does see it is Alpha at the end. For whatever that's worth.
Mm-hmm.
Alpha sees it.
One person who, for all the act he's putting on, I think he sees what's going on. Or at least he has figured it out by the end.
Oh, Alpha. Well, because Alpha gets screwed by the same brick wall.
Yes, exactly. In two directions. First, because of his own upbringing, and I mean, he is a victim of the whole patriarchal system because his mother is.
Yeah.
And also because because of his love for Matthew, which is just like Frankie's love for Matthew. He knows what it's like to be on the outside looking in and to pretend that you're someone you're not so that Matthew will love you.